Hi again, I'm Jayant Sharma, and in this video, let's understand the basics of exposure. In my photography tutoring, I come across a lot of photography beginners intimidated or confused by this topic. But there's nothing so mysterious or complicated about it, because if you're able to see this video, you're experiencing exposure. Because exposure is simply the phenomenon of light hitting an image plane. Right now, light from your computer or phone screen is passing through your eyes and falling on the image plane of your eyes, the retina, and forming an inverted image of the scene. From there, signals are carried to your brain where the image is straightened and interpreted. Similarly, in a photographic exposure, light being emitted or reflected off your subject falls on the camera sensor, from where the image processor converts it into a digital image. There is, however, one critical difference. Your eyes are constantly exposed to light and therefore work more like a video camera. But in a still picture, you're capturing a finite amount of light for a very specific duration. That means we need to control the amount and duration of light going through the sensor. There are three channels through which you can do this. These three constitute the famous exposure triangle. They are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. That is, the amount of exposure in your image is a sum of the light being let into the sensor from these three channels. If too much light is let into the sensor, your picture may turn out too bright, where parts of the image or the entire image may be washed out or white. We call this blowing out or overexposure. If the opposite happens, your picture may be too dark or underexposed. Therefore, the right amount of light needs to be let in through the combination of these three channels for the exposure to be just right as per your perception, neither too bright nor too dark. If the calculation of this appropriate combination is done by the camera, we call it auto exposure. If it's done by you, it's manual exposure. We'll discuss each of these in detail in the upcoming videos, but first, what's the most basic thing we need when we are trying to control or change the quantity of something? That's right, we need a unit of measurement, and that unit of exposure is called the stop. One full stop increase of exposure is double the amount of light, and one full stop decrease of exposure is half the amount of light. That means in any given lighting, suppose you keep the aperture and shutter speed the same and increase the ISO by one stop, you will be letting double the amount of light to the sensor than what you were before. We'll learn more about this in the upcoming videos, but for now, let's summarize what we have learned in this video. Exposure is simply the phenomenon of letting an appropriate amount of light fall on an image capturing medium. Exposure is achieved through three channels, namely aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. The amount of light for the three channels needs to be controlled to achieve the desired brightness or optimal exposure in the image. If the camera calculates the optimal combination, it's auto exposure. If the photographer sets it, it's manual exposure. The unit of exposure is a stop. Well, that wraps it up for the basics of exposure. I hope you found the video useful. The next video is on shutter speed, and I'll see you there.